Hello everybody and welcome back to the Hearthstone Wild Open. My name is TJ, joined once again by the ferocious Frodan. And we're about to find out who's the final player from Europe to join us at the live finals. And we started off with a 3-0 with General, but man, last series was pretty intense.
It was pretty intense back and forth. What shocked me the most was I thought Drew was one of the better classes, and more specifically Aggro Drew was one of the better decks in the entire format. And it turns out it was struggling to get a win outside of the mirror, and it stayed that way throughout the rest of the series. So a little bit sad to see Bertic get really close, especially because he had the Priest in his lineup and the Paladin, but not meant to be. ZerO be the one moving on. He's playing Alb987 for a chance to go to the finals, TJ. And I think coming down to this losers finals, it's going to be interesting because we got the Warlock Shaman Mage Druid up against the Warrior Shaman Mage Druid.
Yeah, just a one class difference there. But these guys, of course, are planning to join the 3 people who are already qualified for the live finals from China: Shanghai Yuyi, and of course SH Royal Baiza, and a General who we saw earlier just 2 matches ago secure his spot. So we'll see who's going to join him. Then, of course, we have Americas and Asia Pacific later. But there's the bracket. 1 spot remains for Europe. Will it be Alb987? Will it be the ZerO, the hero?
Yeah, one guy's counting down and one guy's already there. And we'll find out who is going to be at the finish line. Remember, $25,000 for the prize pool. And that's as big as a lot of the major tournaments that happen in Hearthstone. You look at some of the other events that happen outside, DreamHack or some of the other stuff there, like even Starladder, which is also happening this weekend too. $25,000 a lot of money for the first time we'll ever have Wild. So I hope this is the beginning of more support as time goes on, because I think people will start catching on that there's a lot of cool ways to play Hearthstone. We have, of course, the arena format, Tavern Brawl, and Standard, and everyone kind of forgets about Wild once in a while.
Yep. It's cool to go back and play it, and well, I don't want to say a lot, but some of these players, they do play Wild the majority of the time. But Wild is not figured out by any means. It's you talked about it earlier, the fact that players bring lineups that are sort of in disarray when you look at what they're trying to do. A mixture between aggressive decks, a mixture between control decks or mid-range decks, because they're just trying to bring either the decks that they think are the best or the decks that they're the most comfortable with, because that's what's going to win you games, as opposed to trying to predict what's going to happen in the crazy world of Wild.
Crazy indeed. Let's go into the first game of the series. Remember, it's a best-of-5 conquest format. Win with each of your decks and be able to move on to the grand finals. It's Aggro Shaman. This is the 4th game in a row that Alb's going to be going for this Aggro Shaman. And he's going up against Reno Warlock. I've seen this episode before, TJ, and it did not end well for the Aggro Shaman. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. And he draws patches. I think it's the 3rd time he's played Aggro Shaman just today in the 4 games that he's played it that he's drawn patches. So
it's a me, patches.
This patches all of a sudden
Italian? Yes.
An Italian plumber.
Well, I mean, someone's got to unclog the toilet, and he's got quite the sword for it.
He does.
You would say he's got quite the eye.
Yeah, he's also
for plumbing.
He's also shaped like a turd.
Yeah, he just kind of poops right there onto the board, right? So comes out of the one end of the pipe and onto the board. ZerO kind of thinking if he is worth investing Doomsayer onto the board just to stall development. It's not necessarily that you just want to kill the patches, but maybe you feel like your opponent it has a really awkward start. If you play patches, that means that they don't have a better 1-mana minion. Playing the Acidic Swampoos when their opponent hasn't played the Jade Claws yet, TJ.
That's bold.
That's gonna sting for sure. And now that Alb also picked up the Flame Wreath Faceless, he has an even better line where he can coin out the Flame Wreath Faceless. And because of the way it worked out, ends up being slightly okay for ZerO.
Yeah, and I think ZerO is going to realize that this Doomsayer pretty much has to come out, because Doomsayer is just going to get worse as the game goes on, because Alb's going to be able to build up a board that can contest the Doomsayer instead of, ZerO basically buying himself a free full turn. He does have the Twilight Drake to follow it up, so he'll have initiative on board. And I think that was the plan from the get-go with the Acidic Swampoos, was just to make sure that he had initiative, which can be a really big deal.
Well, yeah, he pretty much just played a good old classic Chillwind Yeti, but still can't really deal with the Swimming Faceless, and he taps anyways. So ZerO looking for a way to stall. He picked up the Siphon Soul, which is going to be nice to deal with the big threat. And Alb does have a way to get past this Deathlord pretty easily. Let's see what he summons. Last time he got a really fortunate outcome of summoning out the other Flaming Faceless. Looks like he's also holding on to the coin here. Okay.
It's pretty bad, actually.
About average.
Yeah, about average, considering he still has like the Blitzo Corsairs,
right?
Tunnel Trog. I guess Tunnel Trog would have been a little bit better in this situation because of the fact that it could benefit from overload, but definitely it's no Flaming Faceless or Aya or even Tunnel Trog, but still
Totem Golem.
Yeah, Totem Golem. I mix them up all the time. They're one and the same. So Demon Wrath, Mortal Coil, plus a trade-in is a way to clear this board. He can also just say, I'm okay taking damage. I'm a Sylvanas. But his Sylvanas will basically just get traded off the board, and once again, Alb will have initiative because he's the one dictating the trades.
But ZerO also has the Abyssal Enforcer, and outside the Flaming Faceless, almost everything that your opponent plays is going to get swept up by it. The exceptions, of course, being Aya leaving behind something, and then the Totem Golem. So I think you're sort of okay as long as that plays into it. ZerO's going to develop this Sylvanas. Just feeling at 27, being pretty safe here. And Alb looks like he's going to go in for a pretty big punish. He's going to try to push in at least 11 damage, potentially, with his weapon. He doesn't have the second Jade Claw, so he might be feeling tempted to hold on to this. And, well, looks like ZerO does have a board clear, but that Sylvanas did not get the value originally that it was wanted unless he attacks first with the Sylvanas and then Abyssal Enforcers. Okay.
Whoa.
Is he going to Shadow Flame instead?
The Sylvanas Death Rattle will trigger first.
Right, so
it won't even steal
it. Okay.
Yeah, so that's probably the worst outcome for ZerO. He was hoping he'd just be able to sweep up the entire board with the Sylvanas. But it will leave, it's a 2-2, but, I mean, it will leave something on the board. He could also...
He could attack with the Sylvanas and then coil it and then Shadow Flame, whatever, but it's kind of like really lazy or something. But,
yeah.
And you also lose the Sylvanas body. You might not clear the board anymore.
Yeah.
It seems like you'd rather just go for the guaranteed clear of the first half of the board. Al picks up more follow-up burn. How big are those Jades, by the way? 3/3. Well, they're starting to really pack quite the punch.
Yeah, now, one thing to note, ZerO doesn't have any healing besides this Diraxis that was just picked up, so he's looking at being dead potentially the following turn. So there's no overload coming in from Alb, so he has 9 total mana available next turn, which is enough mana for Crackle, Lava Burst, and Jade Lightning. He's
gonna die if the Crackle rolls at least a 4 or higher.
Yeah.
And I guess you go for it. Don't get that spell damage to him. Just Crackle first, right?
This is when your Crackles always roll 3. Oh, got him. 5 is plenty. Alb finally manages to pick up a win with the Aggro Shaman. It only took him 4 chances, but 4 chances was enough. He put himself in a good position by being in the winner's bracket at the beginning of the day today.
Yeah.
So he gave himself those that chances. So despite drawing patches, Alb is still able to take the win against the Reno Warlock.
Even despite drawing patches on the first turn, you look at kind of how the data lines up there, and Reno Warlock does tend to be pretty decent against aggressive strategies because it, like, especially against aggro druid, has a lot of forms of area of effect cards like Demon Wrath, Hellfire, Abyssal Enforcer. But against aggro shaman, even dating back to prior to Ungoro, there was a time where people thought that aggro shaman was even favored against Reno Warlock, primarily because, yeah, you have Reno Jackson, but you don't have it every single time. And even if you do, I can play around this big board and have Flaming Faces hit the face a lot. So you know, aggro shaman even still, in many people's opinion, had the slight edge. Also,
the damage from hand is a big factor in that, whereas Druid has to rely on a board to deal damage because they buff it up. They play Savage Roar, whereas the Shaman can just play, well, I'm just going to say, here's one threat. If you don't kill this, I'm going to match it with a ton of burst damage from hand. So it can be a pretty tough matchup, especially with how lean the decks are in Wild. It's just straight up efficient
sure.
damage.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all the deck is.
I mean, if you look at how Wild decks are just built across the board, the number one thing that kind of sticks out to my mind is just synergy. It's the fact that Wild has so many powerful ways to synergize within each other's decks, and there's a lot of like different combinations. You ever play Hearth or play Arena, and you use this app called the Hearth Arena? It's actually really cool because it shows you all the possible ways you can combo it. But with Wild, it just goes crazy with what you can really do. And how every deck is get outfitted that way.
I know I've been in a spot where I start building out a deck in Wild based off of synergies, and I get to 30 cards, and I'm like, I didn't even get to the point where I'm putting in like the good cards.
I'm halfway through what I really want to put in this deck. You know, it's funny because for example, like you type in dragon, and then you're like, well, I put in all these dragons, and then it's like, but where's all the room for my normal class cards? I don't have any dragons. It's just all dragons now.
I just have 28 minions, like 22 dragons.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, well, I guess I'll put in 2 Blackwing Corruptors.
That's about it.
Lean deck, 0 spells.
Hey, just follow the curve, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So speaking of which, we'll see if ZerO can really bounce back from this. Yeah, he dropped the first game as Warlock, but with Druid, Mage, and of course I think the Warrior was banned, there's still definitely some opportunities for that Warlock to get a win. It is interesting, though, to think about how powerful Pirate Warrior is and how players are showing a lot of respect for it. They don't even want a chance to play against it, even if they teched against it. They're having Galaka crawlers, but people are still banning Warrior.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, Warrior isn't really that much different from its counterpart in Standard. But the couple of differences.
You mean the Pirate Warrior.
Yeah, the Pirate Warrior, sorry. The couple of differences, though, are big ones. Ship's Cannon is one that is one of the most powerful cards in the game in regards to its synergy with the rest of the deck. Cheap Pirates, 2 damage. I mean, you can rack up so much damage from that. Huge board swings early on, which is one thing that Pirate Warrior struggles, is winning a game when they've lost the board. So, also our good old Murloc friend, Sir Finley Murgleton. But this is Aggro Druid, it appears, from Alb. First time we're seeing another deck from him, and he's going up against a Control Shaman.
Love it.
From ZerO.
I love it. One of my favorite decks. I think many people have known that I'm extremely fond of this archetype of Shaman, primarily because it has so many cool ways to win back the board, and more importantly, it's got really crazy powerful tempo plays by utilizing cards like Farsight, Ancestral Spirit, and even some decks are super greedy and play Reincarnate. ZerO throws away Volcano against an aggro druid and chooses to keep a Farsight. TJ, that kind of blows my mind a little bit.
Yeah, Volcano, not only is it a good board clear, sometimes it can just win you the game. Not often in this deck, because a lot of times the aggro druids in Wild top out at like 4 mana. Like Jeeves is the most expensive, or Living Man, I guess, is the most expensive card. They don't play the Bittertide Hydra, which allows you to go for a 1-turn kill with a Control Shaman deck. But again, it is almost in many situations a guaranteed clear. That's a ton of damage they're giving away. But we'll see. He's looking for more specific removal tools. But if you don't find a removal early game as a Shaman, you end up with hands like this where, I mean, you don't do anything until turn 5 unless you pick up something from Farsight. He's got Reincarnate and Ancestral Spirit.
Yeah, this is a deck that's supposed to crush aggro druid. Yeah, very much so. I could make a justification for maybe ZerO was looking for other cards like Devolve, which is even better against a huge buffed board from Druid, especially egg-based ones. But ZerO kept Farsight. He maybe even like mistook this for a Jade Druid of some kind and said, I can play really slow. And if it is a Jade Druid, then by all means, go for that greedy line. But now ZerO's going to be overloaded. He can't play anything for another turn. So he is completely done when Alb's able to coin out this other Vicious Fledgling.
Yeah. He doesn't get Wind Fury, so I think his possibilities of a turn 3 lethal are slim. Because that is possible. If you get 2 Vicious Fledglings on the board, you draw Savage Roar on 3, and you have double Wind Fury. Kel'Thuzad is completely useless. That's just a pass.
Oh, man. He's got Savage Roar. Okay, well, Divine Shield seems really good here. Looks like he's going for just attack because he doesn't believe his opponent has any way to deal with it. He's going for the most optimistic line possible. Can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. And Alb is just running away. Now, ZerO can devolve this board. But if Alb goes wide enough, it doesn't matter because he has Savage Roar.
Yeah.
And he's hedging his bets here.
Yeah, Devolve will bring those Vicious Fledglings down to 2 drops. So there's still some pretty powerful 2 drops that can come out from it.
Okay.
Gilbert Stalker and Armor Smith. Wow.
4 plus 10 is 14.
So not there yet.
Yeah, you know, if Alb I was trying to wonder if Alb extended a little bit more onto the board, he'd have one extra minion with no guarantee of extra power at all. And I was just kind of wondering if maybe he would be able to lethal him. It doesn't look like he would unless he got really fortunate off of the Evolve. Mm-hmm. But still kind of hard not to cash in on 10 damage worth of Savage Roar. And this is the point where you kind of wonder, man, if ZerO had that Volcano, would he be able to stabilize? I think so, and right now he's struggling.
This far side's going to have to be pretty big. Sludge Belcher's not going to...
Oh!
That was a very dramatic
What an eruption! He's going to wipe down this board to 0. Right?
Probably.
What is he not? What, he's not play Volcano in this spot? If you play Volcano, you overload for 2, so your following turns are pretty weak. But your opponent has shown a very clear line that he's taking with Savage Roaring you with 4 minions on the board. It feels like you want to try to take advantage of it, and he chooses to play the Sludge Belcher instead.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind this because there really is, what, 8, 9, 10, 12 health? Actually, that's a lot.
If your opponent buffed the board too, I mean, first of all, you're not getting this Sludge Belcher off, so you can't use Ancestral Spirit onto it. And you know, second of all is like you're giving value to a board already with the like at this point half your hand is kind of dead because you can't use this Ancestral Spirit, you can't use this Reincarnate.
Yeah, Farsight could hit some minion that could be used with Reincarnate plus Ancestral Spirit.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't be able to play it until next turn just because he wouldn't have enough mana to play the minion that he draw, even with the reduced cost, and then play the other spells alongside it.
I mean, I think ZerO was really afraid of the overload because he didn't really have a good follow-up player this turn. He had 4 mana. He probably could just Farsight at best. If his opponent played Living Mana, he'd be in trouble. So what ZerO's probably doing is like saying, my opponent played really weird on turn 4. He Savage Roared. He probably has like Living Mana in his hand. Now that I've seen that he doesn't have Living Mana, I'm just going to Volcano now.
Look at all this armor, Dan!
Jeez. He's got so much armor. He's going to go up to like 45 health.
Yeah. Now, in the grand scheme of things,
on earth?
In the grand scheme of things, the armor really doesn't matter because once the shaman stabilizes, it's stabilized. There's nothing that can defeat it unless he stabilizes at a very low life total, and he doesn't draw any heal, and he basically has to like set up a multiple turn lethal. In which case, that 15 armor is going to make things tough. But
right.
Ooh.
Well, no minion to play directly for ZerO. He has to Farsight, and I think his best chance to land something is White Eyes or Earth Elemental, because that basically pays for itself, and then you can play it this turn.
Let's see. Hex.
Very, very weak card in this position. Hex is just reducing a little minion power on board, which...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if he goes with Ancestral Knowledge, he'll have 6 mana the following turn.
Yeah. And I think he needs to hit a minion really quickly.
Healing Wave will have to stall next turn for him to be able to play Earth Elemental the turn after. Because I don't know if he can afford playing Earth Elemental the next turn for fear of it dying, and then him, again, not having a target for Ancestral Spirit plus the Reincarnate. But, I mean, things could change next turn with the draw. He could see that Alb just doesn't develop anything, in which case Earth Elemental might be the safest. If he thinks that Alb is holding damage from hand, he's actually just going to Hex to take 2 power off the board.
Yeah, because it's like you said, he needs 2 turns in order to get this Earth Elemental with the Ancestral Spirit down. And even then, it's no guarantee because Alb's got a really powerful swing with summoning 3 minions and Mark of the Lotus. And, man, ZerO's got to be sweating a little bit. He's still not dead, but it's... starting to get a little bit scary.
Yeah. So there's 11 power on board.
There is 11 power on board. You're correct.
And it's just the Paladin hero power.
That's also really nice. It almost reduces every single power down to at least half, right?
It effectively heals for 6.
Well, it doesn't reduce the frog damage.
So it only heals for 5, whereas Healing Wave heals for he can still. Oh, he had it with Farsight, so he can still Healing Wave. So basically, he's healing for 5 and then healing for either 7 or 14.
Most likely 14, because the lowest cost card in this deck by a minion is usually Barnes.
Yeah,
that's a 4-mana minion.
Yeah, and then the highest cost for Alb is 4 at Jeeves. So. It's very unlikely that he heals for 7. And Alb draws a Firefly, and that Innervate's sitting dead in his hand. I wonder what ZerO has to read on that card is, but, maybe Living Mana since the board is full, because that card's been sitting in hand for quite a while.
Well, he's given opportunity to see Living Mana. And it looks like ZerO has weathered the storm here, and as he's picked up AoE, but he more importantly has Earth Elemental and Ancestral Spirit as well. So he can actually afford to do both. He can Lightning Storm this turn, and then play Earth Elemental next turn and still have enough mana for all of that because he's going to overload it for 2.
Yeah, he can. So if he Earth Elementals and Lightning Storms, he overloads for 4, so he has 5. Or so no, he'll have 6 mana.
Yeah.
So he can Ancestral Spirit, then Reincarnate.
Yeah, he can do anything he wants. He's essentially just out of the woods at this point. Alb just could not close the game, and this is why the Shaman's so favored against Druid, even despite the fact that Druid was able to get a big board multiple turns over. Shaman cleared it. Now, granted,
only
ZerO...
have 5, actually. There's Elemental's 3, my bad.
Same difference. I mean, it doesn't really matter too much.
Does he play around?
You just double Ancestral Spirit and go phase, I think.
You don't play around the Spellbreaker, Dan?
Is there a Spellbreaker? I don't remember.
I highly doubt it.
Again, for clarification, we don't have access to the deck list because the players don't know, and we don't want to reveal information we don't already know. So it's all speculation on our end. ZerO thinking about maybe the same thing. Maybe there's some kind of silence in the deck that to be mindful of.
In which case, Reincarnate would give him another Earth Elemental.
Right. And it would give him 2 Earth Elementals. So he'd trade into a 2/2, Reincarnate, and have 2 Earth Elementals at the end of his turn.
Yeah.
He can be greedy and play another Ancestral Spirit, which doesn't actually work with the N'Zoth, but then he has a really powerful opportunity if he plays second Ancestral Spirit to lock his opponent out of the game with Kel'Thuzad, Reincarnate, or Kel'Thuzad, and then basically have an infinite source of Earth Elementals for the rest of the game.
And it really is nearly infinite. And Alb realizes that he taps out, can see ZerO ties up the series 1-1. It was looking a little shaky at the start, but man, does Shaman stabilize fast.
Yeah, that Volcano on 5, extremely crucial for ZerO, but more importantly too, his Devolve that he was able to get to stop the vicious fudgelings from getting out of control. And for Druid, that's pretty much as good of a start as you can hope for.
Yeah.
Innervate Fledgling into your opponent playing Ancestral Knowledge is pretty much the nuts for you.
Yeah. Now imagine those vicious Fledglings had gotten Wind Fury. He actually picked up Savage Roar on 3. If both of them had Wind Fury, that probably would have been game.
I mean, you're right. He actually could have just lethal him because remember, he got down to 7 health at one point before he dropped that healing wave.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he absolutely would have died.
Yeah, but that's a risky play with that card. It doesn't always get you what you want. But, before we get into the next game, we just want to take a few moments to highlight some of the differences between Standard Control Shaman and Wild Control Shaman. A lot of times in Standard, at the moment, you see the Jade package with Spirit Echo being sort of the go-to control package because they don't have access to some of those really powerful tools that the Wild Control Shaman does.
I do want to clarify that for the most part, Control Shamans in Wild and Standard have largely stopped playing Elemental Destruction, and this is because Volcano has combined the effects of Elemental Destruction and the Lava Shock. There was this card that reset all of your overload, and part of it was that you needed to play Elemental Destruction, but you couldn't really bounce back from the 5 overload. So Volcano kind of packages that into a much more affordable overload and still clears the board.
Yeah, and these are just sort of just generic decks that we picked up. You can see the Wild deck on the side actually does run that Volcano package instead of Elemental Destruction. We just wanted to highlight some of the cards that you do have at your disposal in Wild, which includes Elemental Destruction, but you're right, as you mentioned. I think Healing Wave is a big one. That's a ton of healing that you don't have access to in Standard that can really swing games. So I think Control Shaman is in a better spot in Wild at the moment than it is in Standard. But Standard, there still is a lot of Control Shamans out there. There was players recently that qualified the Spring Championship in HCT just a couple weeks ago that did have Control Shaman in their winning lineups. So it's definitely a deck that I don't see going anywhere for some time just because of the tools that it has.
The version you saw on the screen there was, I believe, a deck list by VLPS from Tempo Storm. He was using it to climb a lot of heroic tavern brawls and getting high wins. And then, of course, the list that you're seeing being played is the one that was popularized by Sipiwi. He was a guy that gets like #1 every season for a while on both servers, and then kind of just has fun. And that version of Control Shaman is very greedy, but very effective too. Because when you do run into Reno decks or any kind of Control Shaman can just completely fizzle out because you're so anti-aggro that the moment you run into anything remotely slow, you can't really keep up in resources because you all in on one thing. You play like Ancestral Spirit and a big taunt, and they just deal with that taunt in some cases, like a Sylvanas, and you're like, well, I don't have Hex or Devolve, I'm kind of screwed. Yeah,
it's kind of funny that we look at these decks and Ragnaros the Firelord doesn't make the cut in a lot of the wild decks just because of how many powerful cards there are. You talked about synergy earlier. Ragnaros the Firelord doesn't really have much synergy with a lot of decks. It's really just a powerful card on its own, and so it's just funny to look at it in a way where people thought that was one of the most powerful cards. Even in the greediest of lists, sometimes you don't even see it. So let's move into game number 3, though. Alb on his Druid once again, and ZerO is going to be on an aggro Druid himself. So again, sort of highlighting some of the differences between Conquest lineups versus Wild lineups at the moment, where Wild, I mean, anything goes. The strategy is a little disjointed from ZerO with a Control Shaman and then going the other way with the aggro Druid.
Yeah, and let's go ahead and differentiate sometimes the lists and differences even between aggro Druid lists too. Some of the people who like to play more of a sticky board might end up going for things like Soul of the Forest over certain other cards like Living Mana. Sometimes they even flat out replace both Living Manas with Soul of the Forest because they feel like it's a little bit better. Other people like developing proactively and creating waves of threats. So they have Living Mana, they have like this mark of the Yashiraj synergy with a bunch of beasts. And then you have other people who like to differ between that. So I'm curious to see if there's anything. Dragon Egg is one of those big question marks of, how much did you actually go into this egg? Some people play Nerubian Egg, for example, and so a lot of people don't. Yeah,
there's even some players that choose to play Evolving Spores.
Yeah,
which is
it's kind of a joke, but it's not. It's actually true.
Yeah, it's I've seen Evolving Spores, more time. There it is. Adapt your minions.
Production is on point.
It's like Gentle Megasaur, except it's not a 5/4 or a minion, and it's not Morlocks. It's everything. There you go. What a beautiful comparison that just made.
Mechano, except you only get one of those things.
Yeah.
But
bravo.
The big thing to note is in this matchup there is almost just no board clears on either side. Your best board clear is pretty much just utilizing charge minions of some kind and trying to get proactive trades. So Alb's already kind of loading Mark of Yashiraj onto one minion to try to get very good value trades. But the problem is ZerO's going already wide onto the board, and Mark of the Lotus is just the best card in a matchup like this, especially against aggro decks in general.
Yeah, there's often two ways that aggro Druid mirrors go. It's either, a bloodbath where both players have even starts and they're trading back and forth, and then it really becomes a volatile matchup where sort of the first player to draw that big threat like Living Mana snowballs the game. And then there's just blowouts, where one player just gets on the board early, gets those huge Mark of the Lotus turns, and just completely snowballs the game. But this looks like it's going to be a bloodbath.
Wow.
Because Alb was able to swing with the Galaka Crawler. And ZerO is actually going to need some help. While he has that wide board that's pretty sticky, he doesn't have the power needed to contest the minions on the board from Alb's side.
Oh, is that one way he can, though? Savage Roar.
It's just the 4 health just doesn't line up well.
Yeah, you're right. Just a little bit off. So maybe instead he can pick up a hero power. And, actually, I'm thinking about the mage hero power being really good in this spot. So you can ping your own dragon egg. Yeah. Of course, you'd also want things like life tap and other stuff. But you have Jeeves in hand, so maybe it's just better to go for that.
Yeah, leaving your minions at 1 health against a class that can deal 1 damage with their hero power in aggro Druid mirrors is not all that bad because 2 mana in an early game battle like this is very expensive to deal 1 damage. So having, trading 2 mana for effectively 2 mana of your opponents, but you have an upside of the fact that if they don't spend mana, you have an extra 2/1, actually does have a lot of merit. So I don't mind that, but he is foregoing potentially a lot of power if he doesn't pick up a hero power that he really wants.
It's true. It's true.
By spending that pretty much an an entire turn just hoping he finds an ideal play. This is a really tough turn.
Savage Roar does end up allowing him to clear a minion too, which not only removes Mark of Yashirash energy, but also in case his opponent threw in a Defender of Argus into his deck. So that way he can stop that. And of course, like we mentioned, if he has things like Soul of the Forest, it kind of makes it weaker too.
That's... He decided to trade the Savage Roar Dragon Egg into the Galaka Crawler.
Looks like he's going to try to win through playing... I think he's going to try to win the board eventually through just utilizing his hero powers over turns.
Yeah, I suppose, but that's a... Doesn't feel like a surefire way to win, especially since he's so low on health already. And look at this, a 3-1 going to a 2-1. These are trades that they seem weird, but are commonly seen in these Druid mirrors because leaving a minion on the board has inherent risk against a deck that can buff up the minions in 10 different ways.
Yeah, it means a lot more to just have the board to just get that extra damage in, because you don't really have the burst. A lot of these Druid decks have stopped running Swipe. A few of them still have it, but it's not as common as you might expect. It used to be one of the core cards for Druid for aggressive strategies. Not so much these days. Interesting. Now, again, we kind of mentioned that damage is not nearly as relevant compared to other aggro mirrors, and it still is very much the case here. And I actually don't really even hate the Dagger Mastery versus Fire Blast. Both kind of do the same thing, but Dagger Mastery allows you to be more efficient with your mana because you're going to be playing things like Jeeves, and so if you dagger up, you can play Jeeves and kind of have that, not have to hero power twice in 2 turns.
Yeah, you're just trading that mana efficiency for using your health as a resource, which...
Right.
I mean, in this matchup, you kind of have to. You just have to, you know, get as low as you can by using your health and hope that you get there. Living mana picked up, but the Vicious Fledgling on the board.
I mean, I think that was the only card that can really help him come back in this position.
True.
I think that was a massive pickup for ZerO, and Alb now has to kind of decide how he's going to adapt. It might change. Before he might be doing a very aggressive adapt. Now he might do a little bit defensive one. We'll see.
He's getting pretty close, though, but pretty close can sometimes feel very far away as a Druid because once you lose your board, even 4 health can be sometimes hard to overcome. ZerO did give up his hero power, so Shapeshift won't gain him any more armor.
Oh, boy.
So all this damage sticks. No Wind Fury, but plus 3 health makes things very tough.
That's right. He did attack into one of the tree ants, which means that ZerO can use Power of the Wild if he draws. It looks like he's going for another one. So now Savage Roar #2 is available for being played.
Yeah.
And the important thing here is Alb draws 3 cards first. Picks up 2 okay cards. Marking Yashirash does not activate on anything. The Spectral Spiders are not beasts. But here's a question for Alb. Sorry, no. For you too, TJ, if you want. Do you want this question?
I'll take the question, too.
Okay. Is Alb going to be able to do anything to follow up this turn? Because he pretty much just have nothing. He's got, like, well, okay, he picked the Firefly, which is pretty important.
Yeah, it's multiple minions. And the other important thing is he can empty his hand. So he can continue to build up a big board. And ZerO, once again, needs a pretty large swing draw, which I guess is eliminated to 2nd living mana. Because 3 more cards, Alb is very likely to pick up Savage Roar sometime soon. He doesn't even have that many cards left in his deck. 12. There it is. There's Savage Roar.
Oh, man. ZerO picks up his 2nd Jeeves. Probably the worst card he could have drawn at this point outside of Innervate. And that could just be it here.
Yeah, I don't think there's really much of a way that ZerO can come back in this.
Yeah, and this is one of the arguments that you see Druids sometimes sneaking in one of those cards like Swipe or Defender of Argus because they don't really have other ways to get back otherwise, and you can also utilize those ways to push tempo or damage. ZerO goes for the Jeeves here and just Power of the Wilds, or even if he just goes wider, Power of the Wilds and Daggers. I think no matter how he cuts it, he's dead.
Yeah, he is dead.
I'm trying to look at it, see if there's any permutations of him surviving, and it looks like no matter what happens, it's Dunyons. And Alb tossing out the spectacular. A little bit of cheekiness coming out from him as he is going to climb to a 2-1 lead over ZerO.
And he's now one game away from securing himself a spot in the live finals. After a tough loss earlier on to General, who sent him down to the lower bracket, he now still has a very good chance of coming through.
That's right. And, looking at ZerO, he still has his Druid remaining, and it kind of talks about the struggles of aggro Druid even leading up to it. This is, again, the only time that Druids won today on stream has been in the mirrors, which has kind of been a deciding factor in the previous game. I wonder if it's going to be a deciding factor here.
Yeah, because that's going to have to be a crucial win for ZerO if he wants to win the series. Alb's last deck is the Mage?
Most likely the Mage, because I'm assuming that the Warrior is banned.
Oh, Warrior actually wasn't banned.
Okay, then I'm assuming that it's Warrior then.
I am also assuming that it's Warrior. Because it actually will be Warrior.
Okay,
so our assumptions are correct. So Alb gonna stick with his guns here, going with the Warrior. Now it's gonna be interesting to see what Warrior it is.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's Pirate Warrior.
I don't know, Dan. Just because you play 2 other aggressive decks doesn't necessarily mean that your third deck is aggressive.
You're right. But I'm pretty sure that Alb might be playing. If he's playing Pirate, I think he's playing Pirate Warrior because Pirate Warrior by far is the best Warrior deck in Wild.
Yeah.
The second best being a toss-up between Control Warrior and Dragon Warrior. Mm-hmm. And if so, that means that he might be able to play Mage into aggressive Mage too. Temple Mage is very strong. And I want to tell you, TJ, Pirate Warrior in Wild is nutty.
It is good.
It is so sick. And the thing about it is that you don't even have to play on curve. Everyone's like, well, this is awesome. You just play N'Zoth's first mid, then you play. I've seen Pirate Warriors pass till turn 5, play double Ship's Cannon, N'Zoth's first mate, coin out Deckhand, and I just did 12 damage, cleared my entire board, and I lost the next turn.
Yep.
He literally 2-turn killed me.
Yep.
You can play in a multitude of ways. You don't have to play curve pressure style. You can play combo style. You can play mid-range style, where you kind of take it a little bit slow and just clear your opponent, and then threaten damage with your later minions. It's actually extremely versatile and not one-dimensional at all. And that is why I think Pirate Warrior is crazy good.
And that is a pretty good hand as well. Starting off with Sir Finley, doesn't have to use those pirates early on to contest the board. Can save it for some Ship's Cannon, Ship-nanigans.
Ship-cannonigans. you didn't hear that at all, did you?
No, I was too busy.
I said Ship-cannonigans, which is a follow-up to your own pun. So now comes the question, does Alb go for it? And it looks like he is going to go for it immediately. This is something that is probably reinforced by the fact that he drew South Sea Captain, which kind of makes his board even better the next turn.
Boom.
And he's got 2 great targets to shoot. And this is kind of where it's already getting out of control here. ZerO does have a way to kill the ship's cannon. Or does have a way to kill the ship's cannon, but he doesn't have a way to really follow up the next turn. His best turn on turn 4 is Nerubian Egg. He is in deep, deep trouble right now.
Now, he does have double living mana, but he's going to take a lot of damage in the process of getting to turn 5 with living mana.
Man, Frothing Berserker is pretty tempting.
Yeah.
Really, really tempting. And now ZerO has to really pick up the pieces. He's got double living mana. Bloodsail Corsair is okay, but he can't deal with the Frothing Berserker. And that's going to be a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and if he starts trading into these smaller minions, he's going to keep buffing up the Frothing Berserker, which that's going to be, probably the main way that he loses is just by taking too much damage before he can gain back control of the board, because gaining back control of the board is pretty inevitable. At this stage, it's just a matter of, when the warrior turns the corner and says, it's time to stop.
Well,
time to take off the kitty gloves.
Yeah. And pretty much just go to town. I mean, look at this Frothing Berserker. I do want to point out that Druid is supposed to be, on paper, very much favored against the Warrior.
It is.
The Egg Druid is so good at getting on board fast, and you can kind of remove Pirate Warrior's ability to snowball. And even in this tournament, Druid's had a 72% win rate against Warriors. And it looks like it's not going to be the case here. Alps continue to run away. However, this living mana is very powerful to deal with. Let's not forget the fact that there's 10 power on the board for the Druid now.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
yeah,
come on. Look at this Frothing Berserker going to hit face for a lot of damage.
Yeah, now, so if you know that your Frothing Berserker is going to die next turn and you think Surfingly is going to die next turn as well, then there is merit into trading the Surfingly into one of the 2/2s, even though it doesn't kill it.
Yeah, really important. He doesn't have 2 mana available to him, TJ, because then all of a sudden Druid would be able to swing this board right back. And we kind of mentioned that, you know, Druid had a great matchup, and for reasons like that, add Galaka Crawler into the mix.
Yeah, I mean, Bloodsail Corsair will take away this final charge of the Rusty Hook. I think this Rusty Hook is still equipped, which will make that upgrade go down in damage. I don't want to say significantly because it'll still make a 1/3 weapon, but I don't even know if I'll have time to swing with all those.
Yeah, but he actually could have cleared every pirate here because he summons patches. And I kind of wonder why he prioritized keeping his 2/1 on the board when he can remove every pirate synergy.
Yeah, that's a little weird because every point of damage matters.
It really does. Wow. You know, I was thinking like, well, maybe ZerO's turning the corner here unless Alb can generate more damage like that. He's going to go for the upgrade so that way he can be mana efficient and hero power 2 turns. Now you can see the difference of having a hero power that does direct damage versus not.
Yeah. This also makes sure that if second Bloodsail Corsair comes out, that his weapon is at 2 charges, so he'll still effectively guarantee lethal next turn with 8 damage.
Yeah, and I think ZerO doesn't have any way to stop it. He can draw with his Mark of Yasharaj on the Galak Crawler.
But what does he pick up for 1 mana that saves him? I don't think there's anything.
Yeah, like another Corsair wouldn't do it, right? Because he couldn't remove the second charge of the weapon.
He would need Goldshire Footman.
Shield Bearer.
No, he wouldn't even have enough mana. He would need 1 more mana for Goldshire Footman. Target dummy, yeah.
Well, he's got 5 mana, so if he...
Yeah, he had to play Galaka Crawler, then Mark of Yasharaj, so he would be left with 1, so he wouldn't even be able to play the Goldshire Footman.
Goldshire Footman 1 mana?
I thought it's at 2.
I'm
it's
pretty
at 1
sure
mana?
it's 1 mana. Rob Wing sticks it out.
I'm thinking...
The real-life Goldshire Footman
I'm stuck
steps in to correct you, TJ.
I'm stuck in the land of Angora with Stubborn Gastropod. I was like, oh, Goldshire Footman can't be cheaper than Stubborn Gastropod because that's just the best card in the game.
Yeah, ZerO's just going to push as much damage as possible, saying, I hope you don't have damage. And how many times have we been in this situation before, only to realize that it's not about the card he's drawn, it's about the card he's already holding. Alb is going to the finals. He's going to use a card he drew anyways to tilt ZerO.
Well, you already won, man. You really need to tilt him? Yeah, but whatever.
Stop, he's already dead.
And that's Alb987 6543210.
Boom. Looks like this guy won the countdown. At least the race to ZerO first, as he eliminates ZerO and advances to the finals along with General from Russia. So, you know, one thing that's kind of like a feel-good story is that both players end up having the best records into the winners portion of the bracket.
Yeah.
Ends up being able to go through.
Yeah. And it's not quite as impressive of a game record as General had earlier, going 18-1 to make it to the live finals, but still an impressive performance. He went so long without losing a match, only lost one in the top 4. So happy to see that these 2 guys that had success throughout a bracket filled with a ton of great players, wild and standard alike, make it through.
Yeah, I do want to give a couple nods to how well that Burtik and ZerO got as well. 3rd and 4th is a great accomplishment in a field of 64 players, very top competitive. You've seen a lot of the top European standard players in there, like Fino and Show and Wirer. You see those guys all the time at the HCT playoffs, and they're able to get through all of them. 3rd and 4th place gets a nice pat on the back, but better luck next time.
Yeah, it does give them some encouragement to keep participating as we move forward and hopefully see more wild tournaments. So hopefully we continue to see more of those names. But let's go ahead and take a look now at the final completed bracket for Europe. General and Alb moving on to the live finals. And they're still going to have a tough road ahead of them. The live finals, of course, the $25,000 prize pool live finals is going to really allow these guys to cement their names in Wild's history books.
I don't actually think a history book exists because this is the first chapter, DJ.
In the Wild history books, of the future.
Oh, I like it. You're forward thinking. You used Farsight on that one.
I did, and that history book will have its cost reduced.
Let's stop the analogies here.
Fair enough. But they are going to be joined by the two players that we've already seen qualify from China, Shanghai Yuyi and SH Royal Baize. And, of course, Americas and Asia Pacific. We still have 4 more TBD slots available. So those are going to be coming up in just a little bit with Americas and Asia Pacific. But that rounds up Europe. Next, we're going to be heading over to the Americas to see 2 more players qualify for the live finals. So don't go anywhere.